Hi, this message is for everybody who is confused about who to vote for, or you feel like there's no point in voting. So let's start with that. That is what they want you to do. They want you to not vote. Why? Because the number of people who are not voting outnumbers the number of people who are voting. And if each party candidate is getting only, say, 50, 60, 70,000 votes, the remainder of the votes that are from the people who are not voting could swing the election away from one or even both of those, which would be horrible for those candidates, but also for the financial backers. People who are not afraid to buy both sides. Now, when I say both sides, I want you to understand that our country is not actually a bipartisan country. We have many parties. It's just that the media deliberately ignores all of them or almost all of them most of the time. In my almost 58 years of life, I have only seen a small number of other candidates gain attention from the media, including Anderson, Jesse Jackson, Ross Perot, and Ralph Nader. But for the most part, the candidates from other parties are completely ignored by the media, which is entirely unfair, but it is because the media is largely controlled either by people who side with the Democrats or people who side with the Republicans, depending on it. And then there are certain media outlets that are either fake news, like Breitbart and InfoWars, or who are so extremist that they fit into their own category. And I'm hesitant to say who. Most people understand that Breitbart and InfoWars are like tabloids at the best, and very subversive at worst. So the elites who pay both sides, Democrats and Republicans, or demon craps and Republicards, as some people call them, understand that it doesn't matter who wins so long as that person is in your pocket. Now, if they have to pay most of the Republicans or the most influential Republicans, the senior Republicans, and the senior Democrats, in order to assure that policies from, say, ALEC, which is a group that seeks to influence legislators in the direction of the Republican agenda or the business agenda. And there are others whose names I've forgotten, but if all of these groups, these PACs and super rich individuals have to suddenly bribe every major candidate from every single party, well, then it starts to become a situation where they may not actually be willing to do that. And they may decide to do what certain other people like. Allegedly, there is this billionaire who made his money early on in AI and data science named Robert Mercer, who has spent very large sums of money, bought Breitbart News, bought Glittering Steel, which is a video production company that was run by Steve Bannon. Also hired a company called Cambridge Analytica, if you heard about the scandal where Cambridge Analytica was using cute surveys on Facebook, such as which superhero or supervillain or TV character are you most like. That was actually Cambridge Analytica collecting data on you from that source as well as many other sources that they could get it from in order to build profiles on everybody, which they could sell to whomever they wanted to, and also use to serve their customers, including the CIA, Robert Mercer, allegedly, and leaders of entire countries and so on, to succeed in their agendas, good or bad. And yes, Cambridge Analytica and its parent company from Britain, SVC or something like that, would actually cater to dictators who paid enough money. And it isn't just a matter of using psyops or psychological operations to manipulate the situation in the terms of presenting data that could be used by a candidate's campaign party or a dominant governmental group or whatever to influence the public, but also to sway the public by having certain situations occur. So Cambridge Analytica and its parent company have, on some occasions, when they saw that their candidate couldn't possibly win unless things were to change radically. My apologies, it's SCL Group, not SCV. They actually, if they needed to help their customer win, they would actually fabricate an event, and then their customer would come forward and say, "Hey, vote for me. I have the solution. It'll make it go away." And that person would get voted in, and if they got voted in, they would actually make it disappear because there was no actual situation. It had been fabricated by SCL Group. So direct interference through manipulation in a campaign. Now, there are political candidates who have made use of SCL services overseas and in the United States, whether it's under the name SCL Group or SCL America or Cambridge Analytica or whatever Cambridge Analytica's current name is in America. They continue to help unethical people to manipulate the public to do what they want them to do. So that is something that is hard to detect. You have to really pay close attention to things that are said and done to try and understand what's going on. What's easier to understand is to look at candidates, and that's what I really want to talk about, not so much the unethical behavior of SCL Group or the Israeli group that does the same thing, basically, that created the software Pegasus for spying on people through their mobile phones, or what the NSA and MI5 or MI6 or whatever and all the other intelligence agencies do to keep an eye on all of us horrible, horrible human beings because we're all such horrible criminals in their minds, or just for the purpose of control. So if you are looking at candidates and you're not sure which one to look at, the first thing to look at, the most obvious thing to look at, is to find out what their policies are, their positions are, and how well developed the policies are behind their beliefs and positions that they have stated to the public, and what their party says. Okay, so those are not necessarily the same thing, because some people will join a party in order to have a better chance of actually getting voted for when they're actually like a moderate or an independent or something like that, a centrist like me. And not that I would do something like that, but some people see the advantage of joining a party because they don't actually have to follow the party's demands once they get in. I mean, they can potentially get ousted, but they can also work to make sure that they don't get ousted. So look at their policies. Do those policies align with what you believe is true and correct? And try to do a little bit of research on each policy and see if there's a history of whether that policy would work correctly or would work incorrectly. The second thing that is also very important, that also requires some research, is look at their political and personal history. Have they in the past, as a politician or as a business person, behaved in a way that is inconsistent with what they're telling you? And how recently was that? Now, if they have a consistent history throughout time of saying things a certain way, that's a very strong indicator. But if somewhere along the line in the past, preferably the distant past, they changed their views, then the farther back that was indicates either that they're very sneaky or that they genuinely changed their viewpoint. That do their current political views match their historical political views and actions or not? And on the personal side, can you find evidence of misbehavior, such as them being caught lying or cheating or stealing, cheating on spouses, for example, which we have currently some candidates who are very well known for being adulterers and purveyors of prostitutes and things. Also stealing campaign funds, stealing other things manipulating the situation so that they can skirt the laws to enable themselves to redirect funds from one source to another source to another source. So it looks clean, but actually it's unethical or even illegal. Also, look at if they have a history of abuse toward children, abuse toward spouses, abuse toward particular groups, and so on, because all of these are red flags. Now, obviously, looking at policies and histories takes more effort than looking at the person. Unfortunately, there are some people that are so hard to decipher by looking at their public performance that you have no choice but to look at policies and history. However, a lot of candidates, if you pay close attention to them, you can notice some things that are good and some things that are bad. So, for example, if you see a candidate who's constantly rattling off numbers and using logic and is very boring, that candidate will probably be an excellent person from the perspective of logic and data. They will follow the facts. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be great at diplomacy. But if we look at, say, Donald Trump was not great at diplomacy, but, I mean, look at his track record, right? So you don't actually have to be a great diplomat in order to be a great politician. Now, does it help? It tends to help unless people realize that your intentions are good or your intentions align with their goals, for that matter, which could be good or bad. But if you see a candidate relying on facts, relying on logic, that candidate is probably somebody who either is fabricating facts, which some of them do, so you should always check their sources, check for the information. Like PragerU, they lie a lot. You can't trust them. And they're not even a university. They used to call themselves Prager University. Then they had to shorten it to PragerU because I think YouTube said, hey, you can't call yourself a university. You're not a university. You're just a YouTube channel. Anyways, the other candidate type is going to be the candidate that appeals to you emotionally. Now, if you have a candidate who's talking about unity, who's talking about love, about respect and care, that candidate, generally speaking, not 100% of the time, that candidate is probably a good candidate to consider because they're trying to build up the country and make it better. Now, granted, there are some candidates who will appear that way, but over time, you'll see through the cracks and you'll realize, wow, they were just BSing us. They didn't actually care. They were just playing to our hopes to get control of us. And so a lot of candidates do is they will manipulate you, not just with hope and love and goodness and all that stuff, but also with the bad stuff. So they will get you to be afraid, for example. They will try to divide you and say, hey, you're better than everybody else because you're the smart ones. Those people over there that are voting for that party, they're dumb. They'll do things like, oh, that other candidate over there, they're a criminal. They're a pedophile, whatever. They will also play the victim. Or they will promote a certain religion over all other religions or a certain ethnicity over all other ethnicities and so on and so forth. They will promote hatred, which is another way of dividing people up. So there is an ancient historical tactic called divide and conquer. It's often attributed to the Netherlands or the Dutch, but it greatly precedes the existence of that nation. And I don't think it's really fair to blame it on the Dutch because they didn't come up with it. America does it all the time. A lot of other countries do it all the time. A lot of elites and specific groups do it all the time. Divide and conquer is a very successful tactic that is constantly used in the United States to keep Americans from uniting as one to fight the real threat, the elites. But I'm not going to touch on that in this video. So when you look at candidates, you need to look at what they're saying and how they're saying it. So, for example, if you hear a candidate come out for the very first time or second time and third time, and the way they say something that's very controversial to many people is different from the typical way that they communicate with you, they're testing the waters. They're checking to see how their audience will react to this thing. And you will see that a small number of people, when there are these very controversial statements being made, especially early in the campaign, that will be fervently in favor of whatever the person is saying. But they are testing to see how much of their constituency will be like cheering and clapping and saying, yeah, you're right. Because if they don't see a lot of people supporting that belief that they are trying to train you to believe, they will back off of it. But they tend to say it in a different way than their more standard or concrete statements. So watch out for that. If you hear that testing the water kind of speech, that mode of speech where there's maybe some hesitancy or there's a less assertiveness or whatever it happens to be that is different from your candidate's normal mode of speech, that is a red flag that they are trying to push out a lie that may not be popular, and they're not sure. Now, before they can do that, however, they have to have a base. Now, in order to get that base, they use data from, say, Cambridge Analytica and other companies that can collect data. And they use that to find out what people are hoping for and what, more importantly, what people are afraid of. And they will take you on a roller coaster ride in which they will cycle between the things you're afraid of and giving you hope because they're going to solve it. What you're afraid of, the solution. What you're afraid of, I'm the solution. What you're afraid of, I'm the solution. Over and over and over again. So they're going to have you going like this, just like one of those crazy roller coasters that you're so scared of that when you look at it, you start to pee your pants. But they do it emotionally. And when you have somebody doing that, what they're doing is they are actually programming you to respond to them in a pseudo-Pavlovian way. So that when they say something that you agree with or you hope for, then you get really excited. And when they say something that you don't like or you're afraid of or you hate, then you get really angry. And they do this to keep you triggered, to keep you off balance. Okay. So, and that's how they build their base. They find all the people who feel disenfranchised that fit into certain categories. They find all the people who are less emotionally stable. They find the people who are less intelligent, who are not going to be able to discern that the person is lying to them or manipulating them, and so on. And they find groups that feel like, well, I'm a minority and I'm not being represented and it's not fair. And oh, by the way, I believe this, and everybody else, no matter what they think, should also abide by what I believe because my beliefs are more important than everybody else's beliefs. So they will target those groups, those people who feel they're losing power, even if they are the dominant group and they have most of the power. They will get preyed on. Why? Because they're a large group. It's better to have a large unified group than many small ununified groups. So, one example of a group of people that's fairly unified would be Republicans. Republicans tend to, on the average, have a very consistent idea of how to do things and what's good and what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. And then another group that is a very large group would be Christians. So if you can get a lot of Christians to back you up, your chances are very high of winning an election. Also, there are other groups. Those are just two examples of groups that can be victimized or targeted in order to win an election. But, if they can find through data collection, if they can find major things that cross groups that will cause internal cohesion even amongst different groups, because there are so many people that believe it, That's even stronger than getting a big group, because now you're creating a group that looks like they are heterogeneous or mixed, but there are certain core things that cause them to want to stick together, even though there are other issues on which they fervently and maybe even violently disagree. So the more people you can manipulate by finding commonalities, the better. And that's what these people will do. Now, some of them just do it to win the election. And then they have a normal political agenda, which may or may not include the getting more wealth and meeting powerful people so they can become more powerful, making a network, and maybe because they are do-gooders who want to do the right thing. And I think that honestly, just between you, me, and everybody in the world, the majority of politicians are in it for themselves. A lot of them are probably narcissists and psychopaths. They're the smarter kind, though. They're the ones that have a long-term vision. They have self-control. Whereas the ones that are the obviously dangerous types, the ones who go around torturing, raping, and murdering, are the ones that typically end up in jail because they don't have planning skills. They don't have, they're just kind of haphazard. They go on instinct. They go on drive. And those people are far less likely to end up in a position of leadership in politics, especially in a country like this, because they just would be too obvious and they wouldn't be able to control themselves. So the other kind of person, the extreme kind of person, are the psychopaths and the narcissists who are willing to pretend to be whatever their major constituency believes they are. So these people will play on your fears and your hopes constantly. They will play the victim, or they will play the infallible leader that never makes mistakes and is never wrong. In addition, they will sometimes make strange comments that you hear it and you're like, was that sarcasm? Was that a joke? Because if that was a real statement, that's really bad. And then people start nervously laughing, and then the laughter increases, and suddenly you're like, oh, it was a joke. Now, here's the problem. Just because the audience is laughing doesn't mean it was a joke. Just because the audience decided to give the candidate a pass on that very strange statement doesn't mean the candidate was being sarcastic, and doesn't mean that the candidate was lying. It could have been telling the truth. So say, for example, the candidate's giving a speech and suddenly says, and if I'm elected, I'm going to have the current president murdered. And everybody's like, and then somebody who's a fanatic anyways, yeah! And then everybody's cheering and clapping and stuff. That candidate may not have actually been lying. And chances are, if they made a really off-the-wall statement like that, it's not a lie. See, one of the things I've learned about people who have certain mental health issues is that, especially if they lie a lot, is that they will have a compulsion to tell the truth sometimes. So they will spew out lies constantly, mixed up with some facts, and then they'll use that the few facts that they give that are real to bolster their image that they're telling the truth when most of what they're saying is BS. And every once in a while, there's some kind of a guilt mechanism that kicks in, and at that point, they'll tell a truth. So they may say to the audience at large, I don't really care about you. I just want your money so that I can get a private jet so I can go to the Bahamas. And you'll be like, and then somebody will start clapping, and everybody will like, yeah, go to the Bahamas, and that kind of, and it just turns into this, everybody blows off what the candidate has said. And the candidate, if you watch them, may actually look relieved every time this kind of thing happens, because they're testing you to see just how deluded they have made you. And if you were to look at their history, say they always go to the Bahamas, Well, they probably were not lying about wanting a private jet to go to the Bahamas. So, yeah. So if you are dealing with a pathological liar, that will come up where they will try to make up for all the lies by sneaking a truth in there, but not really admitting it's the truth. It's like you catch your child and the cookie jar is empty, and you say to your child who's got crumbs and chocolate around their mouth, "Did you eat the cookies?" "No, I didn't. I don't know who did it. Maybe it was the dog." Yeah. So they will actually do this. I've actually seen it in speeches where they will actually admit a truth. And then the audience is confused, and then people start to nervously laugh and cheer, and suddenly all the audience, it just assumes, well, those people started laughing and cheering, so clearly my worries were wrong. This person is not lying. They're not telling the truth. They're lying. They're just making a joke or being sarcastic. No, probably not. So, some other indicators that the candidate that you're looking at is dangerous would include the only sources that they trust are alternative sources that are generally viewed as bad, like tabloids, for example, or InfoWars, or Breitbart, or the National Enquirer, Star, and so on and so forth in the United States. Those are money-making machines that constantly pump out lies and are constantly in court because they're constantly being sued by A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, all kinds of people who have been lied about by them. And they know that, yes, they're going to lose a lot of money, but they're going to make more money selling fake news to the public, as opposed to, say, The Onion, which is a parody media place. But unfortunately, not everybody understands that The Onion is parody and take it as fact when it is not. Like when they put out a fake news article about a disease called glitteritis or something like that, where all that the glitter that kids love to use supposedly causes some horrible disease, and it was just a parody article, and that's all they do is parody news. They make fun of the news, they make fun of people's gullibility and stuff. The other thing that these bad candidates will do is they will use their own sources of information. They'll say that, oh, well, they say that, but this is the real truth. And they will dismiss and discredit any individual or group that contradicts them, including the World Health Organization, the CDC, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Labor, unless what the news is from that department or group or individual aligns with what they want you to believe. So if you see a candidate who's sometimes saying, oh, you can't trust them, and then suddenly is quoting from them, that's a bad sign that they are not being honest with you about that source. And they will attempt to discredit every source. So scientists will be discredited, doctors will be discredited, other kinds of experts will be discredited because what they say doesn't match what the candidate who is a criminal wants you to believe. Another thing is favoritism. If they show special treatment toward a specific group or groups, where they say, oh, this group or groups really needs, special advantages, especially if that group is already a majority group, then you know that there is a big problem. Now, that you may actually be in that group and you may be excited about the idea that you're going to get special treatment, but that is a very slippery slope that often leads to tyranny. And then you will find, if you are actually somebody who believes and is ethical and moral, you will find that your country has turned into a hellhole. Okay, so the tactic of divide and conquer is something, again, that's ancient. Historically, if we look way back in history, there were two major ways to do it. Divide and conquer physically during warfare. So you try to break up a group of soldiers into smaller groups so that they felt isolated, they felt less likely that they were going to win, and that it was easier to pick them off, and you could whittle them down to the point that they'd surrender. Or not physically, where you use psychological tricks. You use the psyops like with Cambridge Analytica, where you are making different groups hate each other. And I've seen this happening constantly in the U.S. And the media, both sides. Well, we talk about the fake media, and some people say it's Fox, some people say it's all the others. Well, there's bad stuff coming out of every news outlet, and there's good stuff too. I would say AP and Reuters are more trustworthy. You could use Ground News to help you find out what kind of a bias each media news outlet is projecting into the public. But with Divide and Conquer, the goal is to split up the population into groups that are angry at each other so that they're not paying attention to the actual problem, which is usually certain individuals. And this keeps the focus off the real hot topics. And it happens all the time. It is a constant game of let's keep everybody off balance and angry so they can't think and realize that they're being manipulated. Another one is if they are spreading hatred. If your candidate is singling out groups of people, and when I say this, I'm not talking about hate groups that they're singling out, because hate groups by nature should be identified and, I don't want to say neutralized because I'm afraid people will misunderstand, but helped to understand that the hatred that they have is not based in reality, but is based on lies they've been fed. But anyways, these people will target religious groups, they'll target ethnic groups, they'll target nationalities, they'll target skin colors, they'll target the shape of the nose, whatever it is, and they will make all of their followers hate those people. Now, those groups of people that they're targeting, or individuals even, could be somebody that is domestic, somebody that is local, somebody that is far away, or even external or foreign to your area or your country even. So it's one thing to focus against a foreign entity. It's another thing to focus on things internally, because when you focus on groups that are internal to your country or your state or whatever, that is a tactic for divide and conquer with the intent of annihilation or subjugation. In other words, genocide or imprisonment or slavery. Usually just genocide. And then there is misogyny, where, and I'm going to use this in a more generic term because I don't know what the generic term would be, where they are promoting hatred and using the tactics a misogynist would use, male or female, because I don't know the female name for misogynist. They would use the same tactics as those people would be, of isolating you from your support group so they have full control and can gaslight, manipulate, abuse, and ask forgiveness, abuse and ask forgiveness over and over again, and you will not be able to escape. It's like when people were in Jim Jones's People's Temple, which ultimately led to almost all the members of the People's Temple committing suicide or being murdered down in South America when he went nuts and killed a senator who had gone to visit, and then so on and so forth. Then there's there was another cult, I forgot the name of it, where this guy said, well, on a certain date, the aliens are going to come and take us off this planet and take us to heaven, and so we need to divest ourselves of our mortal bodies in order to do that. So they all committed suicide. The Heaven's Gate cult, or the Moonies, or the Scientologists, or any of these other quack groups. They teach hatred. They teach, and the leaders, who are all often very charismatic, will keep you isolated from sources that can protect you and ground you in reality. And actually, being charismatic is a very important thing to consider. It's not necessarily true that all or most or of the candidates that are very charismatic are people you cannot trust, but some of them definitely you cannot trust. And especially if you see that they're building a cult of personality around themselves where people are very devoted to them because they're so charismatic, that is generally going to be a red flag, but not in every situation if there aren't a lot of other red flags surrounding that person. Like, the leader of North Korea or Putin, those people have cults of personality where they deliberately, to the public, foster an image of being wonderful, kind, loving people who are doing the best for their country, making lots of sacrifices when they're just taking advantage of the country and the people. So you have to be aware that charismatics can be very, very troublesome because they are very good at manipulating. So again, the misogynists try to, or this particular type of hater tries to take their group and keep them away from any other group that might help them see the light of day. Another thing that is very concerning is when you have a political candidate who makes strong appeals to a particular religion or sect, because, obviously, if we are in America where separation of church and state is important, it is important that our political leaders not be trying to undermine that, not be trying to take the beliefs of one group and make them more powerful than all of the other groups so that all other groups are oppressed. So we have to be very careful about that to maintain that separation of church and state. Otherwise, America will fail, and it will most likely fall into tyranny or fascism or both. And if you see a person who is charismatic and people are starting to say that person is a prophet, that is a big red flag, especially if that person is not denying it, or they make statements that suggest that, they might actually be a prophet, or they're out and out saying, yeah, I'm a prophet, or I'm a religious leader. That's a really bad sign. Another thing that you should pay close attention to is victimhood. If they are often making statements about how they're being picked on and how they're the victim, how they're constantly being brought into court over all kinds of charges, and that it's the current administration, even though they have a long history of being dragged into court for breaking the law and being unethical and stuff, that is a very major tell that that person cannot and should not be trusted, because it's not something that has to do with the current administration. It has to do specifically with the fact that they are corrupt, that they are unethical, that they are criminals, if there's a long history especially. And we have some candidates currently who have very long histories of being brought into court again and again and again for misdemeanors and felonies, for civil cases and for criminal cases. So be very, very careful of people who claim to be the victim. The more often they claim victimhood, the more likely that they are not victims, or that they are very paranoid. Having a leader who is paranoid is extremely dangerous as well, because a person who is paranoid and believes they're being persecuted, getting into a position of high power, if you look at history, you'll see that as their paranoia progresses, they become more and more violent toward any person or group that they feel is after them. Could be very legitimate causes that people are presenting in a very reasonable fashion, but when you have paranoia, you're no longer reasonable. You become unreasonable when it comes to anything you're afraid of or any group you're afraid of, and you will lash out, and eventually you will start hurting and killing people from those groups that you're afraid of. And ultimately, if we look at the history of certain tyrants, they have gone to the extremes of, over time, they start killing their closest advisors, their friends, even their family, because they're so paranoid, there's nobody that they actually trust. So if you see signs of that, that's a really bad sign. We do not want to have somebody paranoid in the position of leadership. Okay. And I think I already said this, but you should be wary of candidates who are constantly putting down all their opponents, especially if they start calling them criminals. Now, even worse than that is if they start inciting certain behaviors, or they start suggesting violence towards certain groups or people, because that at that point they're actually negating their freedom of speech. Because when you make hate speech that targets people or might result in injury or death to a person or group of people, you are legally no longer protected by freedom of speech, and you can be taken to court and put in jail for that kind of behavior. And we do have some candidates that have been engaging in that, so that's very, very worrisome, because they're inciting violence. And some of them have a history of doing this. They get their followers angry, and then the followers go and do things that were suggested by the candidate or intimated by the candidate. Now, if you have a candidate who is promoting nationalism, that is something that is also a red flag. Hitler did that, and several other political leaders who were ultimately tyrants or dictators did that throughout history. Nationalism is where you unify the nation against internal and external forces or groups, and it becomes this downward spiral. Just look at Hitler. Hitler's a great example of a lot of things. And the last thing I want to talk about here, and something that should concern all of us, along with these other things, is that if you see a candidate who is not behaving maturely, who can't maintain their composure under stressful situations, especially as the president, you have to be able to deal with stress well. One of the reasons I would never try to be president is because I can't handle stress. I'm not particularly easily manipulated, but stress really messes me up. And I know that's a significant weakness that would make me a bad leader. So I would never get into that position by becoming a leader. You have to look at how do they behave under pressure. And then when I say pressure, there are lots of different kinds of pressure. Like some kinds of pressure I don't have a problem with. Like if I'm doing customer service or tech support and the person calls up and right off the bat they're angry, I know they're not angry at me. They're angry at what has happened to them. They're angry at their situation. They feel that maybe they feel that they've been blown off. Maybe they feel they've been unfairly treated or ignored or whatever. That's happened to me. I totally understand that. But when I have a situation where, say, I'm on a forum and suddenly a bunch of people start ganging up on me, claiming I did something that I didn't do, well, I'm going to take that personally, even though I shouldn't, because clearly there's a misunderstanding. But sometimes I get swept away by the moment, and I forget to just take a step back and say, okay, why are they doing this? What's going on here? I don't understand. I should seek to understand first. And that's what we should always seek to do. And a politician should always seek to understand, not lash out, and not become defensive, not go on the offensive. They should be careful and very measured in their responses. So if you see a candidate who, when they are flattered, they fawn all over that person, and when they are attacked, they become very defensive and indignant and outraged, and they can't even focus on what they're actually supposed to be talking about. Those are significant red flags that the person lacks the maturity to be a leader. And, in fact, they may actually cause a lot of problems because they can be manipulated into being used. They can be manipulated into doing what they didn't intend to do, into saying things that they didn't want to actually say, that they may not even believe. But in the heat of the moment, when they're very passionate or very angry, sometimes we say things that we don't mean just to be hurtful to the person who's hurting us. And that is a very bad characteristic to have in a leader. So these are all things, and there are other things you can look out for. If you study psychopathy, narcissism, and manipulative behavior, you can pick out other qualities in somebody that are red flags. This is not by any means an exhaustive list, but it definitely helps, and I hope it helps you. But please remember, your vote does count. No matter what you may think, the elites and other people who have a vested interest in you not voting don't want you to vote. So get out the vote. Vote for who you think is the greater good. Don't vote for the lesser of two evils. When we vote for the lesser of two evils, we always lose. Concluding with a little story. A person went to hell, and when they entered hell, Lucifer came up. Now, I'm just pulling from the mythos of the Judeo-Christian Islamic religion, but there are many other mythoses for which this doesn't really apply. But just bear with me, please, if you're from a different mythos. Lucifer came up to the person, or Shaitan, Satan, whatever you want to call that supremely evil being, and said, look, we've got a special deal going on right now. Now, normally we assign to you a demon who's going to torture you for the rest of eternity, but just for today, we do this once every millennia or so you're very lucky. We're going to let you choose which demon gets to torture you. And so you say, so which ones do I get to choose from? And Lucifer says, any demon in this room, including myself. I don't mind. You don't have to choose me. I'm not putting pressure on you, but you can choose any of us. Any single person in this room or creature in this room, whatever you want to call us, is fine by me. Okay? And this is the only way we know to make this, I don't know, maybe fair for you, because you've seen us and you can talk to us and ask us questions. And so the person says, oh, wow, I didn't expect this. I mean, I heard all these horrible, horrible things about hell, and here you're giving me a choice. Wow. Thank you, Lucifer. I guess they said lots of bad things about you that weren't true. So the person goes around, interviews every single creature in the room, but they notice that as they're moving around the room, the demons keep on shifting around, and it seems like they're blocking the human's view of one area. And so this person deliberately finishes interviewing most of them, and then instead of continuing with the rest, shoots straight for whatever it is that is being blocked from his view, and finds this bedraggled looking creature in the back of the room that has different characteristics, I'll just say that, than the rest of them. Doesn't look happy to be there. Can't get close to them because other demons keep on saying, stepping in and saying, hey, what do you want to ask me? And then he gets closer, and Lucifer says, so have you made up your mind yet? And is standing directly between the person and this mysterious bedraggled figure in the far corner. And the person says, I haven't made up my mind. I'm still considering, still have some more I have to interview, but who's that over there? There's nobody over there. I don't know what you're talking about. No, over there, right there. And the person points directly at this poor creature that's behind Lucifer. And Lucifer finally gives up and says, oh, that's one of our less effective agents. They don't do a good job. But you said I could choose any creature in this room, right? And Lucifer said, Yeah, you can choose anybody in this room. So I could choose that one over there. Well, you haven't talked to them, and there are so many other great candidates in here. But so, and the person says, "But you said I could choose any creature in this room." And Lucifer is looks like he's getting a little bit irritated. He says, "I said you can choose any creature in this room." So, okay, great, Lucifer. I'm going to finish up my interviews, and then I'll come back to you and let you know. And the person walks away and interviews more demons, and then goes to that critter in the corner that looks so forlorn. Starts interviewing, and discovers, after a period of time, that the creature is actually not a fallen angel, not a demon or a devil, but actually an angel who has been assigned the task of trying to save souls, which is difficult because, the demons are always trying to get in the way and cause trouble and stuff like that. So the interview proceeds, and the person realizes, wow, here's a chance at salvation. And obviously maybe I'm not going to be tortured. Maybe this will be some kind of penance that's reasonable. Maybe eventually I can go to heaven. And so just to make it look like they haven't already made up their mind, they go and interview the rest of the demons. And then they go back to Lucifer. And Lucifer says, "So, have you made up your mind? Maybe Moloch or Mephistopheles or Baal or Beelzebub or one of the others? Who would you like?" And the person says, "The one over there." And so he's pointing, and there's a demon in the way. And so the demon says, "Me? Oh, no. Move out of the way, please." And he keeps on doing this until it's clear to Lucifer, who knew already, that the person has chosen the angel. And Lucifer is fuming. He's got smoke coming out of his ears. His eyes are blazing with flames. He's broken his staff into tiny pieces because he's so upset that somebody noticed the angel. He can't get rid of the angel. They can't touch the angel. I mean, they can treat the angel poorly in a non-physical way, but they can't do anything actually to the angel. So the angel's like, "Me? You want me? Yes." So my point here is this. You can choose any bad person you want. They're still bad. So the lesser of two evils is still evil. Always choose to ignore the lie of the lesser of two evils. Choose the greater good. Choose the person who will unify the country, not tear it apart. Choose the person who will give more people equal rights, not less people and fewer equal rights. Choose the person who does not profess any interest in having absolute power, not the person who wants to be a dictator. Choose the person who will help everybody, not just help the rich, the elites. I hope this information helps. I'm sorry it took me so very long. The first video I made was actually half this length, but I made a mistake and I had to throw it away because it was not audible. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And as always, be civil. I do not tolerate abuse, and you will be reported, deleted, whatever, if you start in on me, because there's no point. So, just no point. Don't try. Thanks for watching, and I hope you make the right choice to help make America great again, if it's ever been great. Well, make America great. Yeah, let's make America great, no matter who you feel the candidate is. Vote for the one who will unify, not destroy. Hi, thank you for watching my video, and I hate doing this, but things have gotten pretty sketchy with my employer, and without going into all the details, which I have covered at other times, at least in part, I need some financial assistance. If you have the opportunity to do so, that's great. If you don't, even if you can just put in a word of support in the comments, that helps. To have even just that is good. But financially, I need to be able to carry on doing what I'm doing with these channels. Not so much this channel. Not so much the Eclectician channel, which is mostly just me learning about stuff and sharing it with you. But with my Glenn's Fast Reviews channel, where most of what you see that I review, I've purchased myself, or I've gotten at a food pantry, or somebody gave to me because they know I do reviews. But I have invested huge amounts of money in it. And at this point, with a little over 1,800 viewers, I'm earning maybe $125 a month, which doesn't cover the cost of what I've done, let alone the ongoing cost. And then even worse than that is my third channel that's the PC Expert Amateur, which I've invested a large sum of money that I should have been saving for my retirement, because I wanted to be able to present a lot of information about fans and air coolers and water coolers for computers and other things as well. And in order to do that, I had two choices. I either had to make deals with manufacturers and sell my soul, or stick to my ethics and pay for things myself in order to not be beholden to somebody and not feel like, oh, I owe them. So yeah, it's pretty costly. And with the situation with my employer, Amazon, in which the workers' compensation company Sedgwick refuses to fix my shoulder, which was injured at work over a period of months last year because Amazon's management refused to abide by their own policies to provide me support. I may end up having to pay for the surgery myself with the help of my insurance, and that will still be very expensive. And then I would be out of work for at least a month. So switching to another job, it would be hard, because if I come to you and I say, hey, I want to work for you, and you're like really interested in me, and then I say, oh, by the way, in the near future, I'm going to be having a shoulder replacement, so I will probably be out of work for a month. You're probably going to say, I'll pass, thanks, though. Which would actually be illegal, and you won't tell me that's why you're not choosing me. But, it is a problem, especially with me being as old as I am. I'm almost 58. So if you could please, if you can either go to the my YouTube channel, Glenn's Fast Reviews, and you can make any kind of a donation on there, any size, any time you want, through that, because that's my monetized channel. Or you can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Glenn MII. That's GLENNMII. And you can make a recurring donation. The smallest one I have on there right now is $10. If that's too big for you to give on a monthly basis, let me know. I can always add a smaller one than that. I just need to know. But again, if you are financially strapped, please don't send me money. I don't want somebody else getting into trouble financially just to help me. That would weigh very heavily on my conscience. So thanks again for watching this video, and let's make the world a better place.